Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 4. So, if you notice this map, and the reason you're seeing it is sort of the faction map here, the button that starts my recording software is the same hotkey to put to the faction map, so that's why you see that. We're using the German marching music for this German playthrough series, give a little more immersion. It is not a political statement by my part or anything like that. Since I don't speak German, whatever the words may be doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just doing this for fun, as we're letting the clock go here. Oh no, I want to speed that up a little bit more. Okay, now. So, producing. Right. Eventually, you start peaking out on the amount of factories any one province can have. Okay, September. Let's build a few more military factories. And we also need to... Let's look through this again here. Excuse me. I'm going to start another factory of fighters on yeah. The reason to do this is I'm gonna stop that, is that sometimes when we say research a new model of fighter, we may not want to have all the production interrupted to go to the next version of the fighter, so that you still keep some of the older ones in production at the sort of best pace, but start up the lines in the other one. So multiple production lines can be very useful. Okay, we're going to go with the first Vienna Award. Now, get that going, and we've also got enough political power. We will pick the Chief of the Air Force here. We've got Ritter von Grimm. He was the last head of the Luftwaffe at the end of World War II. He came into Berlin after Goering sort of tried to take over the Third Reich. Don't know how much you all know about the details of the personalities, but Goering was very full of himself, and he very much thought that he and a lot of the key Nazis were going to be needed to run Germany in a post-war world. He didn't realize that that was entirely unacceptable to the Allies, but so he had tried to sort of set up a sort of take over, because Hitler was so-called trapped in Berlin and tried to sort of take over the government. Well, at that point Hitler dismissed him from all of his positions and put Ritter von Grimm in charge of the Luftwaffe, and he was in Berlin, and he was one of the last few people to fly out of it. He was actually a passenger in a small two-seated, I think it was a Storch, but a small airplane that had landed in the city streets of Berlin. This is when the fighting was going on, and it was the female pilot Hannah Reich who flew him out of Berlin. She was never part of the Luftwaffe in the sense of holding any official position of rank or induction, but she was a long-term test pilot with them and had been awarded several military awards. She was never a combat pilot, but flying out of Berlin at that time is flying out under combat conditions, so she had a few of those types of flights, but that was one of the last few flights from some of the early city streets of Berlin, not from the airport. They didn't have control of the airports by that point. So that's who he is. Albert Kessering. I don't like the portrait picture they used for him in other places because he was known. It's very unsmiling, and he was known as Smiling Albert. He was a artillery officer in the German army in World War I. So he was a full experienced army officer who later obviously transferred over to the Air Force. He was in charge of the air operations in the Mediterranean. Actually sort of Rommel's commander for a while, because he was theater commander, and then once the Italians collapsed, he took over the land campaign, was a pretty good defensive general, commanding ground troops defending Italy during the latter parts of World War II. So that's who he is, of course, and he air experience gain, bad weather penalty minus, and then of course everyone knows Hermann Goering there. He's playing with a I think that's a tiger cub, or is it a lion cub? I don't know. See him there. Air support plus 10%. These are your choices. Well, let's just go historical. Goering. Such a cute picture of him playing with the lion cub. How many anti-tank guns do we have? Well, sort of question is, do we have enough? What I want to do here is add support anti-tank to all of our infantry divisions of the main type. Let's give it just a brief. Okay, see now we're down over 1,000. So that's what I thought we would be. So we're going to increase by 2 any tank production. Now we can import some more oil efficiently. Again, wrong there. Okay, oil. Let's see. Yeah, we need to do Soviets instead, I think. Don't like giving the extra factory to the Soviet Union. Now, historically, Germany sort of did that. To build heavy steel armor, you need big pieces of engineering or manufacturing equipment, as you may well imagine. And the Soviets were incapable of building some of because you also need big heavy equipment to build some of these things, and to sort of roll armored steel, shape it, bend it, it takes a whole lot of machinery to do it, because you're not trying to do soft steel or soft metal or anything. You want very hardened armor, and I don't know all the technical processes, but the machinery that allowed the Soviets to make the hulls of the T-34s and KV tanks were only able to be done because if you look at their earlier vehicles, the BT series, primarily the BT-5s, BT-7s, were only able to be done because of machinery sold to them by Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union was such a pariah, none of the other major industrial powers would sell them this equipment. I think Germany probably thought it was mainly going to be used for building, maybe they didn't care, but I think it was, they thought, and this is just my guess, that it would be used for building ship armor, because to build the big armor plates for ship, that's the type of machinery you need. And the Germans weren't really worried about Soviet naval armament or rearmament. So I think that was it. And because the Germans didn't need that heavy machinery to build their armor for their tanks at the time, so they weren't quite looking ahead. So you wouldn't have had the T-34 at least as early and as quick without Germany willing to sell the machinery to them. Whether the Soviets could have eventually worked their way up to it, that's quite possible. Or eventually maybe somebody else would have sold them the equipment. But countries like France and Britain and the US weren't in the mood to sell it, so they might not have been able to do it. So that's how the war changed. So I would prefer not to give them a free civil factory, but I guess they're one of my... And one of the... I'm doing that now just so that... set that up. Do some better radar there. So that we have that going once... we're going to improve anti-air. Once the war starts, or make more of them. Once the war starts... Oh, we don't need that much diagonal to click. Okay, well... Yeah... the buttons are a little... too small for my taste. Keep clicking the wrong spot. Do easy adjustments. There we go. That's what I wanted. Now, air combat can use up a lot of air power, and I'll show you how to sort of minimize it without totally giving up your air control. Well, I guess I can show you now. I know some of you are, I'm playing this and then uploading and whatnot, so going a bit slower than you would be with this airport, I guess, than you would be. So what you would do is click on your air zone here, puts the fighters up here. But here, no retreat, which will mean that your fighters will stay up there and fight it out and keep fighting it out. And I've noticed that it will burn up all your air power. And then if the enemy still has more air power, they'll come in and you can't keep production up. This is normal operations. Only fly missions if wings are at 25%. Strength, otherwise they will ground themselves until they get more air power up there. And then low intensity is at 50% strength. It'll maintain that, so if it goes slightly below, they'll come back down, but you can always adjust or change. Now we're going to stop because we don't need to use up aircraft trying to have them operate. Okay. See, I don't know that we're doing repair already. These are all good, but we've got some of the more useful or essential ones already researched. Artillery we will start in 39, improving all of that. Got that going, and I'm right now not focusing on ships. We will in time do subs. But we will do this because we want to have our subs to operate effectively. So we're researching better submarine warfare. Okay, the Panzerkampfwagen 3 has been researched. That is most excellent. But we're going to leave that alone for the moment. We're going to go back and research direct ground support. Notice because we have some we did the air improvements. We got some improvements there for air power. Okay, and finally, we've got all these other choices. You can look through them. I like to put up next milk here. Give the air a little better interception and agility capability. If you want to go bomber, you want to go Hugo Sparrow. You can improve recovery rate for the Army, or Army logistics, or you can do Navy. Or if you want to do you want to focus a bit more for paradrop effectiveness, since it's only limited. Okay, the first Vienna award. That's good. Now we want the fate of Czechoslovakia. Okay, now that we have our basic government filled out, we're going to start using our political points for other diplomatic type purposes. Go to this map. Build more air. And we can build more factories now. Okay, December 38th, so it's still fairly early. We still have enough time to build some of our infrastructure. So we're going to our defensive ability, so build some more civil factories here. As you notice, these are a lot cheaper to build than the civil factories, so these will happen quicker. And yes, we'll be getting a bonus when we get the rest of the main part of Czechoslovakia. Now, this is something you need to watch up here. The higher it gets, the more likely you're going to have intervention by some of the democracies. And we'll change some stuff. Okay, well, I'm going to let those continue to... Already more civilian factories. See, they just all popped up very fast. Okay. So there's this, you know, to get more of these, and you start building more that you need trade, you need to use the civil factory. So to import resources, so there's sort of that here, but so you have that back and forth, so you don't want to necessarily just go to get quote-unquote enough civil factories and then go over to always over to military. So there's reasons to keep that somewhat balanced. Okay, now here, I guess I don't know whether I just don't like choices or whatnot, but this one will get you a lot more aces. Will generate 25% greater chance of generating aces. Now, some of the games that I played, because I left the air power that we just talked about on no retreat, my squadrons got decimated with the aces in them, and then the aces were dying off quickly. They can die off even if you don't kill off the whole squadron, but they can die off. So I think, because, and those aces do help out, but we will still generate aces, but air superiority mission efficiency by 15% is what I think we're going to go to and take that instead. We're getting a 50% bonus on research time, so it's happening a lot faster. we're getting near to getting the rest of them. There's very little industry in this part of Czechoslovakia. Okay, now let's examine this here. The end of Czechoslovakia is at hand, and our forces are marching into Prague at this very moment. With the surrender of the Czechoslovakian military, we have liberated vast quantities of armament. Their tanks, in particular, should serve our forces well. Bohemia, and Moravia, but will be annexed into Germany as a protectorate. But what should become of Slovakia? We can set them up as an autonomous puppet state under Joseph Tiso. Now, I know I have a bit of an international audience here, including like my friend, friends Vlad Virgil and George 1941. George 1941 being a Czech, he grew up behind the Iron Curtain. I grew up, here in the West, in the USA. I was always taught that the Czechoslovakian state was just a puppet state, when it was a puppet state, but it was artificially created by Germany. Well, lo and behold, once Czechoslovakia got its independence fully from the former Soviet Union with the breakup of the Warsaw Pact, first thing that happened, Slovakia wanted to be independent. So that, to me, just as a historical aside, they really wanted to be independent from the Czech Republic, Czechia as you can now call it. They wanted to set up their own state. But yes, it was a puppet of Germany, but there was true nationalism to do that. Now, like I was just saying, as faster this increases, and it's sort of being generated by Japan fighting in the Far East, the quicker we will start seeing opponents appear effectively. So we can set up Slovakia. This little bit down here will become part of Hungary, or we can partition it with Hungary, which gives basically Hungary at least more. I don't know exactly how much, because I haven't done it with this version, whether it's all of Slovakia, or I think it may be all of Slovakia. Or we could take it. I don't know if any of these will increase the threat levels or world tension levels, but obviously it will cost us political power to do so. I just would rather have Slovakia here as a bit of a puppet, and I know that there's very little resources or manufacturing there, so we're going to do, and partially because I'm doing it somewhat historical here, I'm going to pick this, but there's reasons not to. You can see the map changes. German troops have crossed into Bohemia and Moravia. This is the international reporting. Ostensibly to restore order in the region. Yes, as part of their justification was, as Hitler got, whether it was Tiso or one of the other leading Slovak politicians, to sort of declare independence and that basically threaten a civil war. And so Germany's just very kindly coming in. There's Tiso, that's Ribbentrop there. Very kindly coming in to restore order and keep chaos from happening and turning into a civil war. That's all that Germany's really doing, because the Czechs, as you can all well see, can't even handle their own government, so they're not worthy of having a state themselves. I'm obviously giving you the German line. With a collapsing Czechoslovakian government in Prague, occupying forces announced the creation of autonomous protectorates within the German Reich. With German support, Slovakia declared independence under the leadership of Joseph Tiso. The nation of Czechoslovakia is born. Okay, so we've now got a lot more resources, and as they mentioned here, we've now inherited a lot of equipment. Doesn't show up well here, but more artillery happened. You notice, I think we were at 20-some thousand, I forget, just before the small arms. We've now inherited a bunch of Czech equipment. I think we also got a bunch of their light tanks. Now, here you can see here it much more clearly. You see fighter 93 of them, and you see CAS 1 63. If I start moving the tooltip, they will disappear. Those are, and like Bombers 29, those are just generic equipment types that we've gotten from a miner that doesn't have specific names for it, because our equivalent to some of those are either the HE51 or the BF109 type, depending on what year model they are. So, and we've also similarly got some of that when we acquired Austria. You can see here the fighter with just a silhouette. Similarly, so some of these would be Czech and some of these would probably be Austrian types, and similar going on down bombers. So we've inherited a bunch of equipment. So they have that mechanism, as well as inheriting their factories, which we're now going to turn over to producing German types of equipment. One thing we're going to do, since we recently got them, is start producing Panzer IIIs. Oh, let's go with 5. We're going to move to the top. Shift clicking to get them to the top. So I want them up there. Priority for fuel and resource, other resources. So we want to do that. And I want to put here in the secondary line of production for fighters to that, which we're expanding it now. As you can see, we need a lot more resources. So we want to, let's trade with the Netherlands. No, this one back here. I'm not really worried about upgrading the Dutch army that much. Sweden is going to increase that. We want to set another national focus. Mostly you want to do that right away until you get to a point, eventually you run out of them, or you don't want to declare war on the Soviet Union too fast. Let's reassert Eastern Powers, which is basically them. So now we're rapidly producing stuff. Paratroopers. We have a war economy in essence. Here we don't have total mobilization. We can't do that until we're out of war. But because we are a fascist country, I'm not exactly sure. I think we could if we were also communist, but since we're fascist, we can go over to that. We have limited exports. As you can see, you have additional factory output. This is the best for manufacturing, but I've tried it in the past, and some of the competing for some of my other nations were able to buy away some of my needed aluminum and other things, and I couldn't stop that, meaning they will sell to foreigners even if my needs aren't met. So that's sort of the problem with the free trade. Export focus is just, there's no point for that for us. If you were a small miner or somebody like that who had a lot of resources but not a lot of manufacturing, you could do that. Closed economy, we need to be at war to do that, to shut down everything else. And conscription here, just going over. We're doing extensive. We could drop back down, but the training time is the only thing that's really here. Here, we don't want to do this until the war starts, and we really need the manpower. We got almost 2.5 million additional men there, able to. You notice factory output and construction speed, not just training time. go down considerably, but eventually we will need the manpower if we want to grow the army big. Okay, so we are February 39. Since I am a infrastructure, resource, and other sort of builder first, so we're going to do that before we do the tactical. I'd rather make sure I'm building enough weapons than worrying about if my fuel production is the best possible. And got that, so production efficiency cap, so we'll be even more efficient with our lines that are already fully efficient. So when we inherited Austria, we inherited their units here. Because it was a different situation with Czechoslovakia, we got their equipment, but not any of their units. But we are generating some manpower from them. Okay. Let's see. I'll just see. Okay, we're low on anti-tank, and we're low on light tank. So let's increase anti-tank. Now that we're into 39 and we're going to be producing some other stuff here. Several things I want to do. I want to build some anti-air focused here first to stop some of the bombing, or at least disrupt them. I want to build a few airports, air bases. Okay, these will build fairly quickly. I want to build some radar. So it's better to see what's going on and better to do anti-air. And I want to build some synthetic refineries, but I think we're going to build some more civil. Okay, fighting formations. And we're going to swap that over to here. This is factory repair speed from bombing by 50%. Maybe not as useful if we're not going to get bombed too badly. That remains to be seen. But what is it's required to get more resources produced, as well as eventually improve construction speed. So just useful, but maybe not as useful at the moment since we're not being bombed right now. At some point I'm sure we will, but and it also can rebuild factories and other damaged infrastructures just because there was fighting in the province that caused the damage too. So it's not just, so like when you take new territories or whatever, there are other reasons for that too. Let's increase and increase this problem. And I think we will also increase our imports from Sweden by 1. Factory produce. And as you start building more and more advanced equipment, you'll need more and more resources. Okay, Eastern claims. That's great. That will give us a little more that starts the war, basically. And it's not that far from a historical start. But we have to also, we want to do the Ribbentrop. Unless you want all of Poland, and then that could cause other problems. But I'm going to go and start the naval effort. Just another little history lesson. I know many of you have watched my other series, so you already know a lot of this, and of course read a lot of it. World War II started by accident. It was not meant to be started. Just like Hitler wanted, we talked earlier in this series, wanted a training war, attacking Czechoslovakia, and that whole Munich conference was just to keep France and Britain out of the war. Hitler miscalculated and thought that the Western powers weren't going to intervene, even though they said they would. That's what happens when you become a feckless politician like Chamberlain was, who gives in too easy, says one thing and then does something different, so no one's sure what they'll do. That's the key. Not whether he made a smart move, because I do agree that Britain wasn't ready for the war over Czechoslovakia at that time. Whether they should have been or not, that's another question, but they weren't. But his whole sort of demeanor and the way he bargained it out is Hitler thought he was going to keep giving in. So he thought his war justification claims for Danzig, actually it was the Danzig corridor, Danzig itself was a small independent state that was Germany's any second Germany wanted it, but it was this sort of corridor across here. He thought he was going to be able to have his war claims justified for taking this and then partition Poland with the Soviet Union and have general peace. He didn't realize he was going to start the war. That was his mistake. So I'm not going to... And then he started the war too early. Germany wasn't ready for it. Well, I'm not going to wait till the 42 or 43 that was sort of his timetable and what he was telling particularly his naval builder, because they need a long range. You don't build ships in a week or a month or sometimes even a year, depending on your production methods. Long-term plans for building up the Navy, he thought it was going to be sort of 42 or 43 to start the main war with the Western powers. I'm not going to wait that long, but you don't need to have the war in 39 against September 39 against Poland and then wait till spring to start the war against France at the historical date, because it's sort of the weather and other reasons that they did need to wait that time. You can start early spring, crush. Oh, and they thought the war was going to be a longer war against, more like World War I against France. You can crush Poland in, say, spring of 40, and then early summer come in and crush Paris. At least that's going to be France, and that's going to be our hope there. So we're going to time that a little different. Now what? Okay, yes, we get memo. Okay, we'll read both of these. Memo, Lithuania folds. Well, it's Lithuania folds over memo. The Lithuanian government has agreed to our demands, and memo will be incorporated back into East Prussia. Yet another unlawful stolen province has been returned to the German nation. Excellent. No, these things keep going. I wish they would. This is the more of it. German forces on their border, poised to attack Lithuania, has given, wasn't really quite that much poised to attack, but Lithuania, they did do a rapid occupation, that's very true. Lithuania has given into a German ultimatum demanding the surrender of the old Prussian territory of Memel. It was passed to Lithuania by the Treaty of Versailles, but now has been reintegrated into the region of Ostprussia, East Prussia. Have we yet reached the extent of German territorial ambitions in Europe? Experts are doubtful. Okay, so don't know what those French troops are doing there. That's what those Adrian helmets look like to me. But okay. I'm trying to know what those were. Lithuania. don't know what Lithuanian helmets we use. As they said, this was in essence part of the German Empire. Pause this while I talk. The German Empire, before with the border with Russia, it was part of the Treaty of Versailles given to Lithuania. Basically, Germany just pressured Lithuania, which had no real ability to defend itself, to give it up. It was not quite as heavily ethnically German as Danzig. Danzig was very heavily ethnically German, and when Germany was pushing for it around this time, there were swastika flags all over the city and on all the public buildings. It was put out by the local city government. It was the Free City of Danzig, but it was basically controlled by the Nazis. The post office, there was a small Polish garrison in it and a few other things like this. The Poles built this Gdynia here. No, it's Danzig state, but this is the province of Gdynia. Built a naval, which is still in existence today, where they import and export Polish arms going in and out of Gdynia by Polish law, unless it's been changed. A small port was built here for the Polish Navy, because the Polish Navy, this is the primary shipping route for goods and whatnot in and out of Poland, but they made a small naval port over here for the Polish Navy to be based on. Okay, so Zog submits to Italy. Well, that's King Zog, the first of his line, as King of Albania. His son, who survived all this stuff, and went down to South Africa and lived there until he died. And an ultimatum has been delivered to the Albanian government by the Italian diplomats, demanding that they submit to a complete military occupation. King Zog has abdicated after realizing the futility of resistance, and Albania will now be ruled in a personal union under King Victor Emmanuel III. Italy looks to the Balkans. Okay, this is basically, as it says there, sort of like Scotland and England was to some degree early on before the Act of Union, and then Act of Union more and more so, but Scotland still to this day has its own set of laws internally, which are different than England's laws. So this was more of Victor Emmanuel becomes king or whatever of Albania, and is incorporated into the greater, I don't know, Italian Empire, if you will, but isn't necessarily part of Italy proper or something. I don't quite know the exact delineation of authority. Now, if you think that this was entirely unpopular with the Albanians, I don't know that that's the case, because if I got it right, and I'm far from an expert on I'll keep wanting to stop these damn things. Every time you don't like that, I wish it would just pause and stay paused until I start it again, not just because I see the thing. Zog was basically a hill chieftain of one of the tribes, clans, whatever you want to call it, in Albania, and he just sort of took over the government at one point. He wasn't elected or any like I said, first of his line. He wasn't any long-standing royal family or anything like that. He was sort of a dictator that called himself king in Albania. So he wasn't terribly popular, and there wasn't going to be any significant guerrilla movement if he went back in the hills, because he, not like all the hill tribesmen or whatever, liked him, or however you want to put it. So he had, in his limited sort of way, been running the government, but it wasn't going to be anything that the Albanians themselves were going to fight long and hard for to keep him in power. And there were no other power groups of any significance that could spark Albanian nationalism at the time. Not commenting about modern day Albanian nationalism or whatever, because I just don't know their political situation. But that's how it was then. So this was a mostly peaceful Italian occupation. And like I said, I don't think it was entirely unwelcome, because just like it is today, I do believe, and maybe not even is, I think it may be even worse today, is how poor and backwards my understanding of Albania is compared to just right across the water here in Italy. That you know, is that it had because they went with an extreme Stalinist government long after Stalin disappeared, and so we're sort of the North Korea, basically, shall we say, of Europe. So, in my opinion, artificially kept backwards. You know, it's one thing to not have money for, I don't know, new nuclear power plants or whatever, super fast internet connections, I don't know, but for everybody or something. But it's just something because of their long-term political situation, they are behind most of Europe, as I understand it. Though, of course, Greece is trying to work its way down to the bottom through collapse and want to even get below Albania, I think, because Greece is moving for the most, I think, chaotic state, messed up state in Europe. That's what they're trying for, I think. I'm not sure. You can talk to some Greek politicians and see what's going on there, but that's just my impression from the distance. Okay, so let's see. Close both of these, sure, plunk and naval. Let's look for. We want to continue down this path, the Blitzkrieg path. That's what we're doing here. So now we will have better organization for. We'll have breakthrough. Unlocks this tactic, which we didn't have when we were fighting the Spanish Civil War, and better organization for our tanks and mechanized troops. They haven't fully, there's a mod out, I forget who's making it, that will add more of these NATO counters to some of these other symbols here. So get better with that. And 39, I think we don't need that just yet. There's still plenty of space to build on radar. But we do want to do this. So that will get that going. Do we have deficits? Anti-tank and light tank. To alleviate that, what we're going to do is build more medium tanks. How do we alleviate light tanks with building more? We got all those captured weapons. We also going to do that, I think. And do this. So we're fully producing there, not too bad of efficiency. The reason we're going to alleviate the light tank needs is once we build up a stockpile of medium tanks, a bit more, we only have 46 right now, then we are going to start converting our armored divisions to have more medium tank battalions, so we'll need less light tanks to operate that. Well, I think this is a good time to end this episode. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Do appreciate that. And of course, subscribe to this channel if you haven't. We're going to continue playing this series and other Hearts of Iron, as you can hear. When I've done the Black Ice series, there's a lot more events, a lot more history. If you want to check those out, not so much for how to play the game like you may be here, but you get a lot of my historical commentary that I talk about the history as it goes along. There just is very little of it so far put into Hearts of Iron 4, but I'm trying to add some of that flavor as we play. So, see you next time.